Okay, how's everybody doing? So what I want to do is show you how I scratch build basically little runabouts like this, and in this case a Zodiac rescue boat, which is going to be on the Carrier Princess, which I'm in full build right now, which will soon be finished. And this is one of the rescue boats that sits on the port side, and it's covered in a tarp. But what I'm going to do is model it as a project to learn some new things and to show maybe some of the techniques. I didn't get to cover all of it, but I'll show you or explain to you how I did this. But if you want a little bit more comprehensive view, if you go to the episode under videos, it's called Scratch Building and Painting the Fine Scale Honker Skiff Boomer Diorama Vlog number 192. Okay, and I covered the whole build on this. It's basically made from just scrap evergreen plastics. Okay, and I even scratched the outboard motor, and they're actually a lot easier to do than you think. And I'll show you what I'm doing with this Zodiac and point out how I do that. So this is about 19 feet long, the same as this honker skiff. It's about a 19-foot boat in HO scale 187, right? Okay, and you can see it's all built like hollow, like a real boat, and planked and so on. It would have been a plywood boat, and some of them had cabins on them, but this one was just sort of a summer run. I think I was going to put a windshield on this, but the one that we had in the summer, we knocked the windshield right off it. We liked the salt spray in the face, but anyway, this one's similar to that. And basically what I did was, or what I do is I get, half a dozen photos of, like Google Images, you can find photos on anything, like hundreds of photos on any subject. And that's where I got photos for this. They're all on Google Images. And I basically scaled down to about 19 feet with a HO scale ruler, and I just drew a rectangle, and I took some tubing, some evergreen tubing. I don't know what size that was, 7/32 or whatever's appropriate to the scale. And then I thought, I want to try it with tubing instead of solid rod. And I basically filleted the end here, like made 4 cuts, and then just shaved out a triangular, and then just pinched the ends, glued that, welded those to look like this, and to the Zodiac. And then I just, like, this is all scrap based on some of the photos. And then I glued, like, the nose piece was 2 short pieces, and I welded them together. They were long though. And then I cut them off later. I think I've talked about that. I often leave excess. That's how I contribute to my scrap pile that I eventually build from as well. And then I just sanded those by eye, and just, lots of dry runs, and then put on a piece of wax paper or whatever, and just get this welded up. Don't worry about glue oozing out, and even if you have to fill seams, use rod and just soak with solvent and just weld it together. The beauty of plastic is you can basically sand away any kind of excess glue or plastic, so it's nice and smooth. And then I decided, well, what about the bottom here? There's this fiberglass deep V thing, hull going on. So I decided that I would want to maybe just build up some gussets here and then just plank it. In this case, I'm using some of these 15 thou by 125 for starters. And I just basically laid a plank on the keel, and I'm going to lay another one on, and then just overlap it, trim it off, and just sort of plank it up, almost like clinker style, but in fiberglass. I'm going to overlap them. And then I'm going to do the rest of the detail on here. Now let me show you a couple other things. So this will be just below the crane. So there's an actual crane here, you can see. This is on a West Coast ferry. So it's of the same period as the Carrier Princess. Okay. Now this is already built, so this will sit just below that, like that. And this was built the same way. And I want to talk to you, one of the tips that I use for cutting detail parts. So try to see it as a plane. It's the same way as a tree, right? So when you look at a tree in the real world, it's 3-dimensional, but just see the 2-dimensional shape, right? And that's all you do, is you draw a 2-dimensional shape, like in this case, the outboard motor. I just sand this down. I just drew a line, took a HO scale ruler and decided that the motor's only, maybe, let's just say the motor's 3.5 feet or 4 feet. And I just basically glue pieces on both sides, see? Like I cut out that section. I drilled holes with the little drill just to cut that out. I left those little details to put those little trim tabs on there, which is scrap. And then you can see where I added half round there. I'm not worried too much. I try to just keep every part square. And then I come in later with files and a sanding stick and my knife, and you can carve it and sand it. And you get a pretty decent outboard motor, which is really how I did this one, see? You know? And once you do a few, right, the first one might be rough, but once you do a few, they actually turn out pretty good when you take some sandpaper to them. And this evergreen plastic is really nice stuff to work with. And the more you try, like I flub all the time on things, I'll try something I've never tried before, and I just try it and then see where it takes you, right? So you can see that that outboard motor is almost ready to go. And then here's how I make a prop. So I took a piece of 20 thou rod, okay? And I just drilled a hole in a piece of 10 thou sheet scrap, like a triangle shape. Just drilled a hole in the center, cut a triangle out, and then just nibbled off some in between there, you know, by hand. Took a lighter and melted a little bit of a doorknob. I was showing how I did doorknobs. Just take a big lighter and melt the end so it's like a rivet head, and slipped it through, put a bit of glue on there, and then just nibble away, right? Bend it with your hand because evergreen plastic bends really nice. And then I'll just cut off the points later, but this will basically get mounted. I'll just weld that right onto the end there for the prop detail. See that? It'll get trimmed down, but it'll end up looking just like this one. Right? And that's how I do it. And it's a lot of fun. And the best thing to do is like, don't fear anything, just do it, right? Try stuff and you'll surprise yourself. And once this is done, I got a few more details like a steering wheel and a throttle quadrant and a couple other details in here to do, and the bottom of the hull, etc. And then probably these davits or whatever. And she's good to go, right? Okay. But anyway, so I'm building a davit stand for this on a plate. I don't need one for this because this one's beached. This one's beachable too, right? Looks kind of cool on the beach as well. But for those of you that if I didn't mention, this is how the boat is portrayed on the Carrier Princess, okay? So what I was going to do initially was I was just going to build like just this part and the bottom of the hull, and then leave all the rest and then cover it with a tarp. And then I sort of started getting into it, and I realized that just go for it, right? Like just build the boat, because I sort of got this sort of finagled on there for now, but and that rod right there, so I can use tweezers to pinch that to paint it. But there's a steering wheel that I built. I got a mount and the throttle quadrant, which I won't put on yet because it'll just get broken off. I just added this rear bar. I think this rear bar is, because this is a rescue boat, right? So like that's technically what it is. So that would be there to hold on to, I guess, so someone could stand up. But anyway, yeah, so I'm building a davit stand so I can mount on the Carrier Princess upper deck here. And I'll show you what I've done and how I did that. And then the crane is already built. I think did I show you the crane already? Yeah, the crane's right here, see? Whoops. Like that. So the crane turned out pretty good. It's built pretty close to the prototype. Okay, like they were all really similar of this period, so, and they varied, you know, a little bit from boat to boat or whatever. So, yeah, so I decided I would just do the tarp, like I'm gonna have the tarp pulled off to the side, I think, in a pile on the deck, like maybe they were using it or something, just as, because it's a neat feature and detail. Yeah, so I want to show you how I built the davit plate here. And I say plate because I'm going to build it on a plate, and then I'm going to drill a hole in each corner and just put a nut and bolt casting on there, and then mount it on the deck. So the actual boat itself will be sort of a separate model, and then the davit stand will be a separate model, and of course the ferry is a separate model. So I can just paint them all separately and mount them nice. Okay, so I didn't really have good photos of this, so I basically studied photos of other West Coast ferries and stuff, and this is kind of what they looked like. They sort of swivel, like I'll show you here what I did with this pin. So this is, I guess I should point out the materials that I used right here. Like you can see, I used a number 262 channel for this work here, and then number 218 rod, which I have right here, which I'll show you where this goes, and then number 291 angle on 20 thou sheet, and it's an HO scale. Is 3.5 feet wide, the plate, by 8 feet long. So basically, I just sort of got into this because I'm sort of warming up again for when I get to the tug, because the tug's actually more detailed than this ferry is. So everything works out in the end, right? So I knew when I built this ferry that I'd really get the juices flowing again. So I'll show you what I did here. Is I mounted these brackets and I drilled holes in them. It's just right angle, and I'll show you how, like this, see how that pin goes through there? So what that is actually, it's just sort of a backstop. When they cinch up the Zodiac, it pulls these davits up tight under the hull, and then there's a pin that they pull, or a strap or something, and they drop away, and then the crane swings it out. But that's how I did that. Maybe that's a better view. Like that's how I did the davit setup, but then once again a separate model. Okay, and then there's the little davit pieces, which is just 2 pieces of channel. One's glued like a T on the end, a little bit smaller, see? And I didn't want to overwhelm the actual Zodiac. Like that's approximately the size, but I don't know what the exact size is, to be honest with you. But I didn't want to overwhelm it. But it should sit on there quite nice like that, where the props and the tail the motor is off the deck like that. So, or the leg of the outboard. So that's how I did that. And then I basically, I'll nip off this rod, and then I'll just glue these in position so the boat can sit on there, and then I'll just drop the plate right onto the ferry, okay?